Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Sari Lehrhoff. I am a holistic psychiatrist, master life coach, and founder of Evolve Masterclass. And I'm here with
Samantha Lehrhoff. I'm founder of Universal Yoga, certified life coach, creator, and leader of Universal Yoga's teacher training program.
All right. So for today's podcast, we're talking about boundaries, saying no without guilt, right? And my goodness, this is one way to level up our life big time without the burnout, without the drama, or maybe even the existential crisis at 2 a.m., right? So let's talk about boundaries and how they're not just for introverts or avoiding awkward social events, right? How do you say no without feeling like you're just hurting someone else or totally disappointing them and the cause of all their sadness at that moment in their life? So, what do you think, Sam? When was the last time you had to hold a boundary?
Because I'm a parent of two young kids and I have a husband, I feel like those boundaries had to be created. And not semi recently, but I'd say within the last 5 years, I learned first what a boundary was. I think that I was just such a free spirit. So everything was just going with the flow. And then when I started to feel my energy levels change, I noticed I needed to make changes. So after that, I would basically just figure out in my household what I needed to say yes to, what I need to say no to. For instance, my daughter, we had her on a travel soccer team last year, actually for a couple years, but we stopped this year because the level of stress in our household was super duper high, 5 to 6 days a week, and sometimes weekends, where both my husband and I would have full-time jobs, and I'm running an entire business by myself, basically. And then the kids' schedules and everything else with no help. So after we had gotten to a point of such a low, we realized something needed to change and we needed to say no, even though we were getting super amounts of pressure from all the other parents. So that would be one of the more recent ones for sure.
I think that's such a great example. And especially with kids, I think we're all more accepting of boundaries when it comes to kids. Oh, we have to put it up to keep them safe, to keep them healthy and all the things. And I know even just in our own house, like I have a rule, no phone in the bedroom, right? That when it's time to go to sleep at night, phone stays out of the bedroom. It can be in his, game area. It can be down in the kitchen, but it cannot go in the bedroom, that the bedroom's for sleep. And that I started early, so it was a little bit easier to keep up with. But I think things like bedtimes can be a little bit trickier, right? Kids will push, right? Especially teenagers will push bedtimes. And that's one I feel is a challenge for a lot of people. And just to be able to uphold it and what has to happen. So I started this thing where we'll turn the internet off at night and the PlayStation and everything else. I'll say, okay, it's 9:45 or I'll push it to 10 sometimes. Internet's off. We're getting in the shower. We're going to sleep. And so that's one that I think successfully is working, but there's definitely the ones that are a lot more challenging. And it could be in every area of our life. And I think a lot of times, like what I'll hear from clients that I work with is just this constant need to say yes to things that they really don't want to do because saying no felt so mean. And so it could be like driving someone to the airport at 4 a.m. or like babysitting a feral toddler for their friends or their sisters or brothers. And we're taught to be nice. This is something that we're raised to be nice. Just be nice, be available. But I think that's not always going to work for us to be our best self because when we say yes to everybody else all the time, we're not being kind to ourselves. And so don't we count? And isn't being kind to ourselves just as important as being kind to others?
Yes, big time. I love that. And I think just on that note is like really being able to feel it when it's a no, like letting your body tell you almost when it's okay, no, not today.
What does your body do when you know it's a no?
Literally, like it'll contract. So I'll get the almost a heavy like breath. And I ask my body, just tell me. I at this point, I've been practicing light and heavy and noticing the difference in my own navigation system. So if something's super duper heavy, because it's a no, my body will have that shortness of breath or like that heavy feeling, and I'll get legit. No. If it's a yes or it's light, okay, cool. Yeah, that could be a yes. And so then I would ask more questions.
I love that. Yeah. And I think this is something that everybody at home can start to pay attention to. What's your body doing? When someone asks you to do something, what's the immediate thing that happens? Is it your shoulders are coming up, your stomach tightens, your breath goes up higher, and it's no longer relaxed into your belly? There's these great body language experts where they'll tell you, you'll be like, yeah. You got, for those who aren't able to see, I'm shaking my head no, but I'm saying yeah. So it's sometimes the body's the one that tells you, no, you really don't want to do this. And so it's being willing to be more aware of our internal cues. That could be really helpful.
And I feel like when you practice it, it could be quicker than anything else. Instead of going the pull, people please, versus, okay, did I get my movement practice today? Did I meditate today? Did I eat? Whatever it is, right? Just to tune in.
I love it. And I've always heard you say, wait, hold on, let me think about this. Is this light or heavy?
Mhm.
Where you're getting a read, is this like an elephant weighing on your shoulders and just weighing you down, and it's saying yes to this thing would be too much? Am I saying it correctly?
Yeah, totally. Totally. And I think a lot of the time I'll need the pause, because I think sometimes life gets so fast and so busy that if we don't, what is Ferris Bueller's quote? Stop to look around sometimes and ask ourselves, right? If it's something that's just, okay, yeah, this feels good. I've taken care of me today. I filled my cup, or I've emptied what I needed to. And yeah, I've got some space to say yes if it is something that play date my kids are asking for, or to stay up a little later, or whatever it is. I think that it is just being able to step off of the autopilot hamster wheel and tune in, ask the question, take a moment. Is it light? Is it heavy? Ask ourselves that, and then choose. Because then if I don't choose, let's say I choose the heavy, then I feel like that's when I'm like, okay, like I knew this wasn't my best choice, right? My lightest choice of today, right? To do that. So, and then the resentment, or the little bit of, this wasn't done as a gift, or I said yes, that whole thing.
Mm, that's so good. I love it. And I think those little telltales that we all have, and maybe it's different for everyone, but it's just like, all right, be aware and determine what gets through and what needs to stay the heck outside. It's like your own personal airport security system for what we're going to allow through it and what we're not. And just like at the airport, we need to sometimes pat down our own impulses and watch that people pleaser part. And also remind ourselves that a boundary isn't about being selfish, it's about being self honoring and saying to ourselves, I matter too.
Mhm.
And I think, oh, when I used to work in the office, like I would just keep saying yes to seeing patients. And I would work and they'd be like, oh, can I, hey, I'm done at work by 8:30. Can I come in at 9 p.m.? And then it would be 9:30 and then it would be 10. And I wouldn't walk out that office sometimes till 11 p.m. And look, I get it. I have like big time people working in finance in New York and they had late hours or whatever else they were doing. And that was the only time they really could see someone where they could truly relax. And I wanted, of course, to be available, but at what cost?
Mm.
And so maybe a boundary looks like, okay, I'll do that one night a week, but not every night of the week. So it's just finding what that is and noticing when it becomes too much. Because whenever I would do those late nights, like I was so revved up, I just remember I couldn't come down from those nights. It would always take me longer to fall asleep, and then I would be tired for getting my son up for school the next morning. And so it's, you know, what are some ways that we can set boundaries without being a jerk to ourselves and others?
I
And
love.
so I was thinking about the soft no, and I'd love to help, but I can't tonight
Mhm.
or not today. It's not the long-winded explanation,
Ooh,
right?
that's big.
Tell
Yeah, that's
me.
really big. For instance, I run a studio. Love to any of the teachers watching this in the future. And trust me, I've seen it from so many different angles, and I feel like I hold space for all of it. There are times where a quick no would, can you sub, let's say, for another teacher, or somebody is asking for another sub, and I'll get a big winded answer. And I know it won't work for me tonight. It's just is enough. All right.
This is hysterical.
And again, it's listen, then it's okay. Then should I have been more compassionate in my response and saying, okay, do my best to like, but I do feel like it is an energy sucker sometimes if it's in a different area
Really,
of your life too.
really interesting. And as a therapist, my therapy mind, parts work mind can't help but think, oh, what are the parts in those people that the part that feels guilty, the part that feels they have to explain and give a really good reason for why they can't sub tonight.
Yeah.
I think that's tricky.
Yeah.
And I think that just noticing the people pleasers in all of us is really interesting. And maybe that's something that at some point, whoever we work with, we set that up in advance, right? We can say something like, hey, there's going to be times that you can't sub, or and don't worry about it. All I ask is that you be truly real, authentic. And if you really can, please do. And if you can't, just say thanks, but tonight's not going to work, or it doesn't have to be, you don't have to give me your life story. And maybe you don't say it in that way, but
Right. But I'm like, there are parts of me at times I thought it, and I'm like, okay, gotta keep going. I've got 25 hats to wear today.
yeah. And I'll challenge that. So what if everybody was always just like, sorry, honey, not tonight. I can't be
Yeah.
there. Is there a part of you that's, what do you have going on? Why can't you
Yeah.
be?
Yes. I've totally thought that in the beginning as well. So it is okay. Is there a balance? That is a great question, right? Is there a balance for just letting me know, hey, it won't work for me tonight versus I would.
And I'll look, full disclosure, I've been like that, right? Because I'm like, oh, I'm moving mountains to meet someone. So if someone wants to like set up a 12 o'clock call and I'm like, all right, I'm going to move my patients, or going to make room. And then at the last minute, they're like, I can't do it. I know I'm going to feel, hey, did you think about me a couple hours ago? Is there any way you could have given me more notice? And again, that's my part. And it's only sometimes it pops up, but we want to be honest that we're human too. And sometimes we have thoughts that aren't the highest and most compassionate for everybody else. In a perfect world, I'm always like, I give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and this is the best that they could do, and this, whatever it was. But we're still human, and sometimes those thoughts creep in. And so we want to honor that there may be a part that's, that was a quick no.
Yeah.
What are you really up to? So I guess it comes down to one of the things that you and I have always talked about, staying true to ourselves. If we all agree we're going to be as authentic and honest as possible, that if someone says no, they really mean no. But if they say yes, then we trust that they're doing it because it really is a yes for
Yeah,
them.
absolutely. I think when we practice, that's
Mhm.
what I would hope for as well.
I feel we know each other. It's different. I know when I can push you a little bit. When you're like, well, I'm tired. I don't know if I can show up today. And then I'm like, what if it's the best conversation? And then, but then I can really tell when it's a full no, when you're like, nothing's coming out, or there's really no wiggle room. But if we don't know someone, if it's not a sister relationship and it's like your yoga teacher or whatever, let's say they text back, HMMMMMM. And I don't know if that's ever happened. Maybe that's the wiggle. And here's another idea, because I was just giving this in class last night at Evolve Masterclass. We were talking about scales when it comes to the people in our lives. What if you were like 0 to 10?
Yeah.
How likely is it that you could cover tomorrow night's yoga class? And so now you're getting a scale. So they'll be like 0, I absolutely can't. I've got plans with grandma, right? 6, can I get back to you? So then you can know what wiggle room you have to play with. And it just came to me. So maybe that works, maybe it doesn't.
We're gonna try that.
Did play with it a little bit. Okay, so there's the soft no. And then what about, because everybody loves the sandwich method, right? Starting with something positive, insert your boundary and with warmth. And so that could look like a friend who's, hey, do you want to go to the gym together? But you're like really burnt out. You could so use that alone headspace time. And you're like, oh, I love being with you, girl. And I love our time together. But you know what? I'm really overloaded, a little bit burnt out this week. I'm going to take this one by myself. But let's get together next week because I really miss you and I can't wait to see you.
Love that. And it just feels so much better when you say it like that.
Yeah. Sandwich time. And look,
Oreo cookie.
Oreo cookie. That's it. The gluten-free kind, of course, organic. But yeah, it's like we can say, I love spending time with you. I need some recharge time this weekend. So let's plan something next weekend instead. And just we're sharing our love, we're sharing what we need, our boundary, and then we're ending with warmth. And if you can try one of those two things. Or lastly is the confident no, right? For those times when someone just isn't getting the message, because this one always comes up in class. Like, what about if they're just not getting it? And so we got to channel our inner queen bee when this happens and not explain. Sometimes it's just better. I'm not available for that. No, period. I'm not available for that.
So I'll share something really funny. To me, it's funny. Today, I actually responded with humor because in the past, I have not all the time. So a boundary that I have at home with my husband, because he's a morning person. When he wakes up, he just can be and do things I've never seen. And me, on the other hand, takes me a little bit to really wake up and legit, maybe even an hour or more. And so my boundary with him that I had put in place was one of my first ones where I'd asked him, I said, listen, honey, I love you. I need to just be honest and tell you that the morning time is really hard for me to talk about schedule, like logic mind, logic brain. I'm not there yet in the morning. So I'm going to need a little time before you ask me about who's doing what and when. Literally, this is 5 years in the making. And sometimes he'll remember, but sometimes he forgets. In the beginning, it was a hard one to like continuously, I think he fought it a little bit, to be honest. And sometimes every once in a while, he still will. Today, we were together and it was before my coffee. And we had some time. He actually held space for me as I took a cold plunge. But afterwards, he wanted to talk schedule. He just assumed I was ready to talk. So I basically, like, he was about to say, so honey, so can we talk about today? And then he didn't pause to hear if it was a yes, because I haven't had my coffee and I usually need my time in the morning. Even though I cold plunged, I was not ready to talk, like schedule, logic, all the things. So as he was saying to me right before I walked away to go get my coffees, can we just talk about today, the schedule, the pickup and the things? And I go, oh.
Bop, 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 bop.
Then I started laughing and he remembered, oh, boundary. And then he turned around and walked away. Like, but I didn't feel the resentment within him. It was like me reminding him in a silly way of remember the boundary.
I
Yeah.
love this. This
Yeah.
is great. I feel like sometimes you got to schedule the schedule.
Yes.
Schedule the scheduling. Can we? What's happening is your mouth is moving, but we don't hear.
Really?
I think whenever you go above a certain decimal, it's really funny. So we've learned today that we're going to schedule the scheduling for when we're more awake. Yes.
And then we're going to communicate that.
Yep. I love it.
Okay.
So this is so good. And I think I had heard a story once about someone who had a similar not awake until the coffee, and the husband just all he wanted was to hug and connect, and she couldn't function until she'd had the coffee, and finally it was just like, hugging is a boundary for me. Like, you can't hug me before a coffee. And she had to explain it wasn't that she didn't love him. It was simply because she wasn't able to handle that prior to feeling fully awake. And this is where we're so different. So it's challenging for some people who don't get it, who don't have the same kind of personality quirks, right? And or just personality traits. Like, as soon as my eyes are open, I could 100% think in the morning. It's like midday for me. It doesn't matter. I'm a morning person.
Yeah.
But I've gone in and done the same thing to my son, and he's like, Mom, the power switch isn't on yet. Back off.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, not everyone has my brain, right? Not everyone is that awake. But like the same thing can happen to me at 11:30 at night. So you could be talking to me and I'm like, does not compute.
Exactly. Exactly.
Is
And
this thing on?
I do find it interesting. I was thinking about this too a lot when we've been talking boundaries for a lot of
Ever.
all the time, days. And I find it interesting when you really look at like romantic relationships, right? Because in the beginning, the video,
In the beginning.
in the beginning, in the beginning, love them. There are no boundaries. You just go with the flow, and maybe that works. But then it maybe doesn't after a while when you're trying to create your life with this person.
Yeah.
And things do change. You're building your businesses or your work changes or whatever it is, you have kids, and then it's just not, it doesn't work the same way. And I feel like that's something to be said if people were to be going into new relationships and starting their lives with someone, to like really know themselves. Because I didn't know that what was or what I need. Maybe I did and it changed. And so I think it's
Well,
interesting.
we can know who we are outside of a relationship. And then once we get into a relationship, you're driving differently, right? The vehicle it's different balance. There's different ways to navigate the curves now with another person in the vehicle. So we just want to take that into consideration. And it's not, oh, false advertising, you've changed. It's, we've both changed. We're both figuring out how to do this together. Whereas I never had to think about my peaceful time in the morning because it was just me. But now there's this other person here invading my meditation time or what have you. And so I don't want to see it as an invasion. What if we just have a healthy boundary so that I still get what I need in and you still get what you need in, and we both then come together for when we've handled the things that are important to us.
I love that. That was so well said.
Yay. I'm glad I could be of service. Oh, it's so interesting. I love this conversation because I think that it really does come after knowing our worth and feeling that we're worthy enough to ask for things that are important to us, to ask for things that we need. It's like we're flexing our assertiveness muscle, and it does get stronger the more we try to use it. So if something drains us and if something doesn't feel right for us, or even if I'll do this thing where I'll ask myself, would future me, but if I say yes today, will future me be fine with this? So it could be like a friend crashing in your living room, right? Will me of in 1 month be okay with this if this person's still there or whatever it might be? And then that might help us also make those decisions and use either the sandwich method and the confident no. But figuring that out for each and every one of us is going to be really important. And I think it's one more thing to say about this is people are going to feel how they're going to feel. And we're going to feel how we're going to feel in life. Our job is not to prevent anybody from feeling anything. Our job is to show up as the kindest, most compassionate version of ourselves and still hold the boundary that we need to put in place and know that someone else is strong enough to take care of their own feelings. So if we disappoint someone, for instance, they're going to be okay to handle that. They can feel however they're going to feel, and it still has to be the way it is, right? So I gave this example last night in class. If I tell a patient, no, you can't have my personal cell phone, and they're like, that really hurts me, I thought we were really close. I can say, you are valid in your feelings, and it still has to be this way. I still can't give you my personal cell phone.
And what if they said, why? What if they push you and said, why? Then why?
Because we have a patient-doctor relationship, and that is a boundary for me. It can be as simple as, that's a limit for me. And I've given this example before, and it's not mine. I took it from a wonderful therapist by the name of Micah Ross. And my boundary is comments about physical bodies are off limits in my household. So you can't walk in the door and tell my son he's put on weight or he's lost weight or his hair looks funny or whatever it is. Those are off limits in my household. So that could be a boundary for me. And if someone breaks it, I can remind them, hey, that is a hard limit for me. We don't talk about physical appearance here.
Right. Love it.
And again, it doesn't have to make sense to anybody else. It could just be something that you've decided it doesn't add any value to your house. And in fact, can actually hurt, right, people. And so in our house, we speak kindly.
Yeah.
You can make up your own, right? You can put anything in that blank in terms of what's important. And look, it could be there, hey, we don't talk politics at our dinner table. Whatever you want to do in your house is fine. We don't do this. Or, hey, there's no shoes upstairs. It's such a simple one. So many people have this limit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We don't wear shoes upstairs. And everyone's, oh, no problem, because it makes sense to them. But it's so funny when something doesn't make sense to us because we wouldn't choose it. We have such a hard time being an allowance of it. And so hopefully conversations like these open up to just being a little bit more compassionate, that we don't have to understand someone else's boundary to honor it. If it's important enough for them to have the limit, then to honor them, we can honor their boundary.
Love that. Our parents had, when I really think about it, it was nothing but boundary.
So many boundaries. We had gates in leading into our living room.
Love you, Dad.
No
I
food,
mean,
love you, Dad. No food in the living room. No kids in the living room, unless we had piano lessons, or we would wait till he wasn't home and sneak our friends into the living room.
uh-huh.
But there were so many boundaries. You
Oh,
couldn't talk at night. Some of them made so much sense, right? He was a doctor. He was doing crazy hours. His sleep was precious. And so we knew nobody could be loud at night and nobody could wake him up. And so those were understandable boundaries.
yeah.
And I didn't really understand them until I became a doctor myself. And I would talk to my son at night and I'd be, listen, unless the house is burning down or there's a robber or you're dying of fever, do not wake me up, because somebody could die. I could write the wrong number on a script and he's too looking at me like I'm crazy. I get it. I get some of the boundaries that we put in place, and some of them might be a little extreme.
I mean,
But
we get it when we're older, we understand more. But if you didn't have a voice when you're a kid, and then now you're older and you're supposed to know how to ask for what it is that you need, and you're supposed to first know what you need, then be able to communicate and ask for it, and then receive it if it can be given.
Yeah. It would be so great, right? If we could teach from an early age to ask, what do we need? What do we want? And understand we might not get it, but we're still allowed to ask for it.
Allowed to ask for it. Allowed to ask for it. Said twice.
Yes. Wouldn't that be a beautiful gift that parents can give their kid?
Yes, I love that.
Yeah. What other boundaries in our house? Am I missing some of them growing up?
I feel like when Dad was home, everything was for Dad's schedule because of his schedule and his work hours. Now it's just such a different story, being able to see him so relaxed and going with the flow. And he's asking me about what works for my schedule. It's funny how life happens and what that is. But yeah, I'm just trying to think. I think the dinner one was a big one. I think not being able to go in their room at night and he would tuck us in, but we really didn't. They had their boundary. Which was, of course, understandable.
Yeah, they had a lock on their door.
Boundaries, yeah.
Yeah. And look, I think that can be beautiful, right? There's so many ways having boundaries can really be healthy for the relationship, for their relationship. And then when it's not like we didn't have another adult in the house, we had Grandpa Herbie.
For most of the time.
Just because he went to bed at 4 p.m. and woke up at 4 a.m. He had his boundaries.
So funny.
I swear it's like the sitcom, right? You have that grandpa that's like on his own schedule eating waffles at 4 a.m.
Yep. Yes.
And our older sister used to joke, it would be perfect timing. We'd come home from being out, and we'd come home from college. We would go out all crazy hours of the night, come home at 4 a.m. and have a waffle before we went to bed. Herbie was just making his breakfast.
Never looked at it like that. Very good.
Yes, just great. Perfect timing. But he was a funny one, right? He didn't want anyone in the kitchen while he was eating. Do you remember that?
Cooking and eating.
Yep. He had strong boundaries.
I hated that boundary.
We'd have to like sneak in. There was a couple ways into the kitchen. We'd have to sneak in to that back way.
Yes. Yeah. Totally
forgot about that. Or like, God forbid, we had a friend over. We'd have to be like, all right, now you're going to crouch down, get really low, hide behind the counter. Don't let him see
right in that cabinet.
There's a lot of boundaries in our household growing up.
So many. I feel like it's just we weren't allowed to make noise, which might explain why I'm so loud as an adult.
That's it. That's it.
Do not be firm. Ah, and
Mhm.
it's like, oh, tiptoeing. Where
Yeah.
yeah.
So much tiptoeing. And I think maybe, at least for me, that's why I'm so loose. Of course, I've shared my couple of boundaries, but I don't have a lot of them with my son, especially with the house. I'm like, oh, you want to drive your crazy cart in the house when he was younger? Just do it. He's like, my friends would be like, but isn't he going to bang up the walls and ruin them? I go, a house is meant to be lived in. I want him to feel like his home is his home. I want him to feel like he can enjoy his home and it is his. And so we'll fix it when we move out.
Such a 180 from how we grew up.
Yeah, really extreme. I'll be honest, there's a few I kept. I do not allow any eating in the bed. And I know you don't have that rule, but I have that one. But we live out in the country, so we can get all sorts of critters. But I do have that one. I'm like, listen, if you need to eat in a bed, do it. And we have the kids' playroom, the bed in there. He can go and do it in that one, but not his bed, not his sleeping bed.
Yeah. I think that's also why I love eating in bed, is because we were never allowed to do any of that.
Mhm. Yeah. I feel just noticing, and this is just a great question to ask for the people at home, which is what boundaries did you grow up with and have you kept them?
Mm,
Or do you have new ones that are the opposite to balance what you put up with as a kid?
yeah.
Just consider it. It's really interesting. The dogs always slept in the beds with everybody growing up. And I think I did the opposite of that one because I saw how when the dogs got older, they would go to the bathroom in the bed. And I was, ooh, I don't want to get in that habit. I'll cuddle with my dog and in morning cuddles with him, but at night he sleeps on the floor. He sleeps outside the door, not in the bed with me.
I think that's so smart.
That was a big one. And it was hard, especially when he's so cute and he's a puppy. But I think this is an important one. Just so I decided to put that in place. He'll start with my son though. They'll start cuddling, but he gets hot anyway and ends up on the floor. But at least he's used to sleeping on a floor. So for the
Yeah.
long term, that's a boundary.
Yeah. Smart.
Hmm.
That doesn't wake you up in the middle of the night, because I feel like that's where, no.
Okay. And also, yeah, my dog is one of those dogs that runs in his sleep. He chases things and his legs start moving. And I will full blown wake up when I've tried to lay down with him. It does not work. It's
Oh,
very important boundary for sleep. Yeah. And he not only does he run in his sleep, he wags his tail. He's like the happiest dog in his sleep. It's bam, pat, 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 pat. Tail is wagging, happy dog, sleeping, waking. It's hysterical. All right. Any final thoughts about boundaries?
hmm. I think it's important to know what you need to take care of yourself, right? And what boundaries can help you achieve or have that. And then also how to communicate that to your loved ones or who you're sharing your life with, the majority of your time and your spaces with.
I love that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So here's a challenge for everybody. Say no to one thing this week that you'd maybe normally say yes to out of guilt. Just one. And then observe how the world keeps spinning and your friends might still like you and no one writes an angry Facebook post. I promise you'll survive and maybe even feel amazing. And if you enjoyed this episode, share it with friends who need a boundary intervention. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode of Evolve Masterclass, where we learn, we evolve, and become the kind of people who sometimes say no and sometimes say yes, but both with intention. Until next time, everybody, take care of yourself and your boundaries.
Bye.
Bye.